Welcome to another edition of Radio Influencers, a podcast series we're doing for Radio Update. I'm your host, Andy Meadows. I apologize up front for the voice. I'm on the back end of a cold, one of the many joys of having young kiddos. When one of them gets it, we all get it, so it's made its way through the house, but I will power through. Yet again, last week, we had another round of massive industry layoffs, this time at Audacy, where reports say as many as 250 to 300 staffers were let go across the country, including on-air talent who had been there for 20 or more years, veteran program directors, directors of marketing, and even the majority, if not all, of Audacy's national digital content team, which is surprising because that's the area we all know that we need to transition to if we want to replace the lost terrestrial ad dollars. Of course, Audacy is just the latest group to have to make this painful move. iHeart, Cumulus, Salem, and others, many others, have all recently either made deep personnel cuts, sold off stations, or both. I would like to say that this will stop or even slow down, but it's unlikely to. Going forward, industry-wide, we're all going to have to do more with less, which, by the way, isn't just the way it's going in radio. This is happening across industries. One thing I noticed when I went to conventions last year is how many companies outside of media, but media-adjacent companies, are bragging about how small they are instead of how big they are. That's now seen as an advantage because it keeps you nimble, allows you to carry a smaller client list so you can customize things and super serve the clients that you do have. It's easier to manage, and it's overall more sustainable. But of course, this downsizing is happening quicker and more publicly in media. So that's what I want to talk about on today's episode. Ways radio can do more with less, and I'll end with where I'm seeing some bright spots across the industry that give me hope. After watching or listening, if you have any questions, email me at andy@radiostationconsultant.com or editor@radioupdate.com, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. The days of having a full staff and big building are over for radio, and they aren't coming back. But that doesn't mean we have to jump to the other extreme and completely automate all of our stations either. There is a real value in having qualified, experienced staff at the local level. From market to market, most of the stations and groups who are dominating listenership and revenue are the ones who still have the most local staff. However, because the margin for error is so small now, we have to keep and hire only the right people. For years, I've been writing and talking about how there's little room left in our industry for specialists. We need well-rounded, self-sufficient employees that take initiative on their own. That's more true now than it's ever been. There's absolutely no room left for people who refuse to embrace change, like we discussed a few episodes ago in our Fear of Change episode. If we're all going to do this with less people, they all have to be more productive and more efficient and focused on the things that will make us more competitive for today's ad dollars. That means utilizing all kinds of AI tools in virtually every aspect of the business, which radio is being incredibly resistant to. In our last Weekend Wire poll, we asked radio decision makers, are you using AI tools to help create digital content for your stations? 90% said no, just 10% said yes, which is insane to me. When there are all of these inexpensive AI tools, some even made specifically for radio, like Radio Content Pro, and yet radio stations are refusing to use them when all other industries are utilizing AI. It also means putting affordable cameras in the studio where we do have air talent left. I saw a digital creator on my feed recently who put it really well. She said, I can turn one 30-minute to an hour live stream into 95 pieces of digital content using AI to transcribe it for blog posts and edit it for social reels. Then I sprinkle those 95 pieces of content like confetti all over the internet to bring people back to the party. I thought that was a brilliant way she worded that. If they had cameras in the studio, a live and local radio show could use that exact same approach, that exact same formula, to take the on-air content they're already creating, capture it all on video, use AI to transcribe and pull reels, and have all of their digital content done before they walk out of the studio that morning. Doing more with less also means utilizing things like market-level song data so programmers know exactly what songs within their format people in their market are already listening to, instead of spending 10 to 20 hours a week listening to a bunch of music, which I admit is the fun part of the job, but there's way too many other things on our plates to justify doing that anymore. Plus, it's no longer necessary because the data that's now available to us takes all the guesswork out of it. Then we just use our radio programming experience to know what categories to put those songs in and maybe select one or two that the audience hasn't discovered yet, but we believe that they're likely to love. That way we're still a new music discovery tool, or we're a new music discovery tool again, because radio's mostly gotten away from that. Doing more with less also means no longer babysitting old, outdated equipment and instead upgrading so everything in the audio chain can be remotely monitored and supported, like what we're doing with our 24/7 engineering service. As a consultant now, most of what my job entails is pointing clients to tools that are now available that will make each of their jobs easier, then training them on those tools and showing them how to implement them into their workflow. Because the answer is not to spend 80 hours a week at the office to make up for the staffs that we no longer have. That just burns us out, isn't good for our health, and there's diminishing returns on the last half of those hours. The answer is to spend 40 to 50 hours a week doing the work that used to take a whole staff to do because we're using modern tools to help with the things that we're weak at and to supercharge the things that we're already good at. I don't use AI to help me edit video because I don't know how to edit video. I spent the pandemic learning video editing because I'm a nerd, because I also knew how big a role video was going to play going forward. I use AI to help me edit video because it saves me several hours of editing time per podcast that I would either have to do myself or pay someone to do. To this day, I still hear radio people say, I've been doing it this way for 20 years, which is absolutely the worst attitude radio people can have right now. We all, including me, who's been doing this my whole life, have to be open to trying a different approach because this industry that we love is fighting for its survival as we speak. Audacy, Cumulus, iHeart, and most of the other major radio groups aren't firing people because they're big evil corporations that only care about lining their own pockets. They're letting good people go because they're struggling to stay afloat, holding on to radio stations that were purchased at a 10x multiple in a world that now values radio stations at a 5x or less multiple. Do I agree with all their decisions on who they're letting go or how they're restructuring their groups? Of course not. But no move that's made out of desperation is ever executed perfectly. My advice to any radio person who's worried they might be on the chopping block is to forget about job titles and job duties, learn everything they can within the building, use every AI tool they can get their hands on, and start creating a lot more cross-platform digital content. Because not only is that desperately needed in radio, there's a massive need for that across other industries as well, which gives you more leverage when negotiating your radio deal since there's no longer the same fear of the radio station across town stealing you away. Some of the bright spots. Since this was a rather dark and depressing episode, especially because I sound terrible, I'll end with some of the bright spots I'm seeing. There are still a lot of radio groups out there who do value local radio personnel. Most of them are independent groups in the 5 to 50 station range. Over the past few years, most of the jobs I've helped recommend candidates for have been at these size groups because they're the ones paying a reasonable wage and a reasonable benefits package. Within days of the Audacy cuts, I noticed a handful of medium-sized groups posting that they're looking for on-air talent and brand managers, including one that's looking for both across their entire group. You can see these jobs by clicking on our Jobs tab on Radio Update and a whole lot of others. Could a lot of those mid-sized groups step up their digital game? Absolutely. But when they're ready to do that, at least they'll have the personnel to do so. What do you think? How is your station or group doing more with less, and what specific tools are you using to do so? Email me at andy@radiostationconsultant.com or editor@radioupdate.com and let me know. As always, if you have some thoughts you'd like to share on this or any other hot radio topic, submit an article about it by emailing submissions@radioupdate.com. If we use it on the site, we will pay you for it. Thanks for listening, watching, and reading. We'll be back next week with a new episode of Radio Influencers. Radio Influencers is a Radio Update production. New episodes are released on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern.